wasn't listening. I thought I was different. I thought I was unique. I thought, I didn't need to have a program in order to stop drinking. I just needed to cut back. What that turned into was a 2 or 3 year downward spiral where I was nonstop drinking round the clock. I drank so much that it went on for days, and I ended up in the ER.
Hi, I'm your host, Christine Nicholson, the Scenic of Scenic Route. This is a safe destination where victims of trauma, alcoholics, and addicts of all types can feel safe sharing their journey. And we have another journey for you today from 48-year-old recovering alcoholic Dean Anderson. Dean is a VP of Sales, as well as author of Was That a Red Flag? And the upcoming Finding Myself Sober. Dean is very active in his 12-step programs and has some great advice for those also in recovery. I know him from Zoom meetings, where his dry sense of humor, wise musings, and sometimes dark wit isn't lost on anyone. Without further ado, here's Dean Anderson, y'all. Well, welcome, Dean Anderson. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Oh, man, thanks for coming on. Well, I'm so happy to have you. You've actually, we've met quite a few times through another meeting, but you are an author of Was That a Red Flag? And you're going to come out with a new book called Finding Myself Sober. We're going to hear all about that soon.
Thank you.
First, what we're going to do is we're going to get to know a little bit about you. Want to get to know what your typical day looks like. What's the life of Dean? When you wake up, do your exercise, hobbies, recovery, all that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to bore you, but it gets pretty. It might be monotonous to somebody, but it works for me. So I get up before anybody. I'm the first one up, usually at around 6 in the morning. And the reason for that is part of what my recovery has brought into my life is the fact that I really do need to get up and both pray and meditate. I made fun of people meditating for years, and I shouldn't have, because it was a game changer for me. I'm a very fast talking, up in my head person. And for some reason, that meditation for just 15 minutes puts me in a zone where I start to listen, whether that means to God or to people around me. So I'm more laid back when I do that meditation. So that's how the day starts. I work exercise into some part of my day, depending on how crazy work gets at the beginning. But I start to work pretty early at 7 a.m., usually around noon or early afternoon. I do 1 or 2 or 3 different workouts, depending on my mood that day. And usually by mid-afternoon, I'm eating dinner with my wife, and we're usually going to some 12-step program meeting. Not every night, about 3 nights a week, I guess.
Nice.
And try to spend as much time with our grandkids, our own kids if they're around, kind of empty nesters now, or we exercise, we go roller skate. That's my wife's big thing.
Oh, I love that. So does she do roller derby, or is it just roller skating?
When we first started dating, she told me she was a speed skater when she was a kid. Like, I'm talking like 8, 9 years old. She was so good that they only let her compete against older boys. It was crazy.
Wow.
But she gave it up because she got old, and in sobriety, she thought she was too old to do it. And I'm like, you're not too old to do that. And I went and I just secretly bought her a pair of skates. And I'm like, now you got to try it. And in some ways, I created a monster, because that's all she does now. She skates like 3 days a week. She's insane.
Awesome. I love that. Well, how many meetings do you make a week? You said about 3?
Yeah, about 3. It depends. I've got some sponsees, so it depends on if they have to meet me up there. But if it's just me on my own doing, I probably 3 days a week. I think that keeps me in the zone. You know what I mean? Keeps me humble.
When was your sobriety date?
Sobriety date is February 7th, 2013. So I just got my 9-year chip the other night.
Congratulations.
And, thank you. And my 21-year-old daughter gave it to me. So that was kind of cool.
I think that's beautiful.
Yeah,
that's
thank you.
Awesome. Well, also wanted to ask you what it was like the first time you used or drank, and what that feeling was like for you.
The first time I drank that was my doing, let's say, like, not just sipping my dad's beer or something like that, I was probably 13. It was a bunch of guys in the neighborhood. I hung out with a bunch of older guys, so they kind of were introducing me to it, And I loved it the moment I drank it. It was one of those things that I'm not sure I knew how much fear I was wrapped up as a kid, or anxiety or whatever, And it just wiped it all away. I felt like a stronger person. I felt like I had clarity, even though that was delusional, but I just felt more powerful as a person, and any fear that I had just melted away. And it worked like that for a long time, until it didn't.
Yep, I hear you on that. Well, sounds like you're all warmed up, so what I'm going to do is let you take the wheel, as we call it here on Scenic Route. Let's have you take the long route into your story. Can you please share with us your downhill journey with alcohol and or drugs, the wreckage, and rock bottom, and then also your recovery upward to today?
Sure. Yeah, it started, as I mentioned, drinking at 13, but nothing that bad or tragic happened. Even in my 20s, I probably drank too much. I was probably a hard binge drinker, but it didn't seem to have a lot of consequences on my life. I think when I got married, and started having kids, I moved away from my home state of Massachusetts, and it gave me the ability to work from home. And that was a real downward spiral. There was no accountability. My wife at the time was a school teacher, so she wasn't home, and it just really escalated, and it got to the point where I was mostly binge drinking at night and then not being able to function well the next day, like a lot of alcoholics will tell you. But there was one day where I woke up, and for some reason there was some vodka left over, and I thought, well, it's 7 a.m. I got to get my kids to school, and I drank some vodka that was left. And I thought I'd found utopia. Like, I thought that was the answer to it all. So I just started doing that regularly. And what that turned into was a 2 or 3 year downward spiral where I was nonstop drinking round the clock. It was like I was drinking and passing out 3 times per day. Like I would get up, drink till a certain hour, pass out for an hour, get up, work. I mean, I was somehow doing my job in the middle of all that, even though it probably wasn't doing the best of what I should have been doing. And it just escalated to the point where my ex was threatening to leave with the kids. And I think that scared me enough. I knew our marriage wasn't doing very well, but I did not want to lose my children. So I initially tried to get into a 12-step program at that point in time. And it just wasn't taking. I wasn't listening. I thought I was different. I thought I was unique. I thought, I didn't need to have a program in order to stop drinking. I just needed to cut back. And that was so not the case. If anybody has alcoholism, they realize it's a progressive disease. It never gets better. It always gets worse. So that marriage had ended. And I wouldn't say I gave up custody of the children, but I knew I wasn't going to get primary as an alcoholic. So I just kind of let that be. And when I had nobody in the house, no accountability, and it's just me, that was the most, I hate to call it demonic, but it was the sickest, most delusional drinking that I just lost weeks of time. I'd start drinking on a Wednesday and come to on a Sunday and not know what happened for days. And at one point, I don't know if this is my rock bottom, but looking back on it was one of the scariest times, is that I was prideful enough that I never wanted to miss a visitation with my youngest, who was still at that time around 11 or 12. And I had picked her up severely intoxicated. I don't have any memory of this. I drove her home. I got her home somehow, home being my house. But she has told me years down the road that she's like, that day, I didn't know if you were going to make it. You were more off the road than you were on it.
Oh.
And I have no memory of that at all. Somehow we got through. I don't know if God got us home. God seems to look after children and alcoholics sometimes. And it's, it's funny only because we survived. And it brought me to a place where I wanted to get sober. And even that incident didn't make me want to quit drinking. That's the weird part. I went to treatment because I had a near-death experience. I drank so much that it went on for days. And I ended up in the ER in about a 0.40 alcohol level. And I was probably, the doctor had claimed I was even still conversing with him. So, I mean, that's the tolerance my alcohol gets you, but I was out of my mind. But after I got out of treatment, I literally convinced myself that I would just drink enough not to go back to treatment. Like, it's insane when you think about it now. But I started drinking again, and within 3 weeks, that was the moment that I knew it had taken off so quickly again, that I think I felt like that was my rock bottom, because I woke up, I was about to lose my job. I hadn't made payments in the house. I was about to lose the house. Everybody was scared out of their mind that I was going to die. I think they say when you're an alcoholic, you either go to jails, institutions, or death. I think for
Mm-hmm.
me personally, it would have been death. And some reason I got back into that 12-step program that I initially went into. And that's where my journey really began, because that's when I decided to really get in the middle of the herd, as they say. Like, I surrounded myself with other alcoholics who had been in recovery. I did a ton of service work. And that's the part that really changed it, because I had been working the steps in a program. I had had a bunch of unity and camaraderie and guys that I had met in the program. That part I loved. But the service part, I think, was that was the last piece that really got me to want to stay, because it made me accountable and I didn't want to let anybody down. I've always had that problem in my life. I was people
Right.
pleasing, and that really made both feet in that program and not want to leave. And I had a hell of a first year in sobriety. I fought to get custody back of my daughter, and I got it. And I
Awesome.
met Cindy, who personally. She
Yeah.
is by far the love of my life.
She's
I didn't think I
great.
either deserved it or I didn't think I'd ever find it. And oddly enough,
Oh.
I found her in recovery. And she was a very powerful piece of my sobriety, because I did not know how to get sober. And she was a glowing example of what sobriety was supposed to look like, because she had like a couple of years of sobriety before I
Mm-hmm.
did. So I kind of rode her coattails for a while, then tried to find myself somewhere in there, and that's kind of what happened. So I got the kids back. I got promoted from my job. I moved out of that house, which
Wow.
I think was full of demons. Now, granted, they were probably self-imposed demons, but I
Right.
had to get out of there. And they say not to make a geographical change to get sober, but I did, and it worked. And I moved in this house that I'm in now, and I swore I'd never drink in it ever, and I still haven't. And that was 9 years later. And Cindy and
Awesome.
I ended up getting married. We're a blended family. We're finally, both of us have got all of our health back, which we thought would never happen, because my liver was failing when this whole thing first started.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
my parents don't have fear in their eyes anymore. My kids, Lauren got the best end of it, because she was still like 13 when Cindy and I got married. So she got us as parents, like, that were completely, well, whatever sane is, and we're really good role models for her. And then, like, I've been able to tell my story and help a lot of other alcoholics, but I've been able to write those 2 books, which I never thought I'd write anything. I'm not really an author per se, but
That's pretty
somebody convinced me
impressive.
to do it, and I got a lot of good reviews and feedback on the first book. And this one's really important to me, the second book, because it's about sobriety, and I feel
That's
like
great.
we can't keep it if we don't give it away, and that's kind of where I'm at now. And I'm 48, and I feel like I got some years left. I just
Yeah.
had to take a hard road this way for a while and come back.
Yep. Hey, I'm 46. We've got some years left in us
Yeah,
for
hell yeah, we
sure.
do. Yeah, I think so.
Well, I really love the story about how you came about writing Was That a Red Flag?
Hmm.
I hear it was during 2020 when everybody else was having problems being bored or being divorced or, you know, relapsing like I was.
Right.
How
We
did
had it was odd how it came about, because, as I mentioned, I don't write. I mean, I like writing, but I never thought about writing a book. And we had random couples that were either sending us instant messages,
mm-hmm.
or they were sending us emails, or they would meet us somewhere, and they were telling us that they kind of wanted what we had, and we weren't considering anything we had to be special, but we knew it worked. We knew we didn't argue. We knew that we were a compliment to each other, and we lifted each other up. um, but we even saw 1 or 2 marriages, or I should say engagements, not come through, because they went to our wedding, saw our wedding, say, that's what I
Wow.
want, not what we have. And we didn't want people to do that. Like,
Oh
that's the last thing I want to
man.
see happen. But it was good that they came to that clarity. So that was just what we were living in for a couple of years. And then a family friend of ours came to me and said, you should really write something. If it sucks and you don't want to do anything with it, don't. But if at least put it on paper, and maybe it could help somebody. And that's what happened. And I wrote those 12 chapters, and I decided I'd write 1 chapter per month for that first year. And it kind of turned out almost like a workbook, where you read the chapter, and then there's questions at the end of each chapter where you apply it to your own relationship to see
Mm-hmm.
if it works. And that's kind of how it came about, oddly enough. And it was the last thing I expected to do at my age.
I love that. And that's a testament to your relationship with Cindy, who is, by the way, a class act. She is top notch. So
She is.
good
And
on
we're
you.
very different too. It's weird. We're very much alike, but we're very different at the same time. So I don't know why that works, but it seems to.
Yeah.
because we're extremely honest with each other. That's
That's
the key to a lot of
key.
it, you know?
Absolutely. Now, how did you go about writing Finding Myself Sober?
Well, I kind of get the itch to write, right? I mean, I kind of liked doing the first book, and in this 12-step program, there are 12 principles that I think we all learn, maybe in all different 12-step programs because there's so many of them. But I think for me in sobriety and recovery, these principles were really the backbone. They don't talk about it much, and they're the backbone of um, what makes us have a design for living. You know, we were probably taught these things by our parents, right? But we don't.
Mhm.
We lost it somewhere along the way. We became something we never wanted to be, and maybe we're now got that reset button to become what God always wanted us to be. But I'm going to list the principles if that's okay with you.
Yes, please.
And that's the name of each chapter. And it's chapter one's honesty, and then hope, faith, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, love. Some people call it justice. That's a decent one. I use responsibility, I think, in the book. Perseverance or discipline, and then spirituality. And the 12th is always service, because that's what we try to bring back to the community, right? So I just feel like those are the things in sobriety where I can take that list of principles on any given day and I can look at them and run my finger down that list and go like this, you know what, that's the one I suck at today. And it allows me to know that's what I probably need to work on going forward. And that may just work for me. It may not work for anybody else. But writing a book about it tells me that if it will help one person, it was never about making money to write a book anyway. It's about helping people. So if it helps one person and they stay sober, I mean, how cool is that? They may go on to do greater things and be a much bigger, crazy, person that helps a ton of people, starts a treatment center. I don't know.
I know,
But
that'd
that's
be
the
great.
point, is passing it on.
I hear you on that. That's how I am with the podcast. I don't care about the
Right.
money. I just want to help.
That's
And
why
that's
I was
what
so
this,
glad you told me you had this, because I didn't realize you had, and we had known each other for a year. And
yeah,
you told me about it. I said, that's a cool thing. If you want me on, I'll come on the show. And
I loved that. You're
yeah,
just so on it. Thank you so much. Now, you shared a little bit about your past, which thank you for that.
sure.
I hate to bring it back up, but did you have um, a worse memory from that particular journey? I think you probably shared it, but it
I
wasn't
think
really a memory.
I think there were, oh, man, that's tough because there were so many twists and turns. I think the one driving my daughter was the one that's the most hurtful, the one that just kills me because I put her in danger. And even as bad as my drinking became, I tried to never do that. But my pride and ego got in the way and I picked her up anyway, even though I don't remember it. I don't know what was going on in my head. But I think the moment I was in treatment was technically my mental rock bottom. They gave me like a little workbook and I was so out of it and drunk, I don't even remember what I thought they gave it to me for. But I thought while I was detoxing in this little, small room, I thought I was supposed to fill it out while I was there. It was supposed to be for the whole 30 days that I was there, right? But
Oh.
I started, right. I was out of my mind. If you didn't know me back then, but be glad you didn't, because I was psycho at that point. There was just
Same.
nothing left upstairs. So I started writing, and I don't remember this because I was still intoxicated and, trying to withdraw and go through the DTs and everything. And I just kept writing, "You're a loser. You're a loser."
Oh,
And it almost gets me choked up every time I think about that,
that's
because
horrible. I'm
it
so
was one of those
sorry.
moments where I don't know why I wrote it, but I never wanted to be there. And I think I got out of treatment what I put into it, which wasn't a ton. I'm glad it kept me away from alcohol for 30 days, but I went in there with the same ego of thinking I was different than other people. And there was a lot of different types of drug addiction stuff in there. And I was one of those last garden variety drunks. I didn't do any drugs. I just drank. So I don't know. That was just by telling that story, which I don't tell openly very often. I think you just defined my rock bottom, because mentally it just ate me alive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And so, in essence, do you feel that alcohol controlled you at that point in your life?
Every aspect of my life. I mean, there was nothing I did without alcohol at that point. So it wasn't even me, right? I don't know. It's tough to say.
So, do you feel you're cured of alcoholism now?
No, but I know I've got that whole daily reprieve they talk about. Like, if I can kind of keep myself in the program and spiritually fit, I think that's what is my medicine to never have to of treating that disease, if you will.
Right. And what kind of dramatic changes in you, your attitude, your life have you had since becoming sober? What are some things you love about you today?
That's a good question. I was a very good liar. Call it a
Mm,
bad liar, but everything that came out of my mouth was a lie during those bad years of drinking. And I was always trying to cover my own ass or cover something that I was lying about or whatever. And it just, it always ended up badly. And when I got sober, that first principle that I talk about in the book is honesty. And that is really hard for someone who, on instinct, you just lie.
hmm
Sometimes you're lying for no reason at all, right? I think that was the catalyst to living differently, right? And then the second part of that was having some hope and faith and getting back in touch with a God that I believed in as a kid was paramount. I just didn't know how. I came from a church that did a lot of structured prayers, if you will,
hmm
and it always felt cold. It didn't feel real, you know. So what the program sort of taught me was that I could have my own personal relationship with God, right? So I started somebody just gave me the recommendation, just start having conversations, no matter how silly or stupid you feel. And that's how it started for me. And that, I think, is what really sent me into a new mindset or paradigm of where I wanted my life to go. You know, I really thought at that moment that, all right, God wants me to be something different. Maybe this is my reset button. Maybe I get to be what God always wanted me to be, but I need to go find that out. But I also had to have some patience with it, right? Can't just all of a sudden find your purpose in a day. Maybe my purpose is just to help other alcoholics. I don't know what that is, but if I wake up and I ask God to guide me every day, and I ask God to help me through whatever it is I'm going through, and kind of surrender to that, you know, and quit trying to hold on to the reins of control,
hmm
life gets different. And the most fascinating thing to me that happened in getting sober is that a lot of old ideas, this could be about religion, it could be about friendship, relationships, it could be about politics, it could be about anything. All those things that you gathered for me, I got sober at 39, all those things that I gathered for 39 years, were a lot of them were false. They weren't even real. Like it was maybe something somebody had taught me. Maybe it was something I picked up along the way, but most of it was BS. It was like reprogramming my brain to have my own opinions or thoughts about things. It was fascinating because I started to have my own opinion about other things, and I think I became a bit of a doormat at the end of my drinking because I just knew I felt worthless. Like that will
hmm
never happen again. You know,
Yeah.
I'll never let that happen to me again because I finally I struggle using the word pride, but it was at least some belief in myself, some faith that I could, with God's help, become what I wanted to be. And I didn't have to care so much anymore about people's opinions of me.
Right.
That's, that's a huge change. You know,
It is.
it really is. And you're taught how to love people at that point. You know what I mean? You're taught how to really treat people the right way. And one of my biggest joys in life is to make people feel better about themselves or point out the things that they're not seeing about themselves that are great.
Right.
Because for so long, I didn't see anything much in me. As much as I put myself on a pedestal, they say alcoholics are the only people who can lie down in a gutter and look down their nose at somebody. But it's because of this
So
deep thing
true.
inside of us that we feel a little bit not worthless, but we feel small and we don't need to anymore.
That's right. That's such a good point. Bringing that up from, from the depths of our depravity all the way up
Right.
to recovery. We do learn to love ourselves again. And how do you keep those channels open between you and your higher power on a daily basis?
It's usually doing two things. One, the meditation helps in the beginning, but
hmm
if there's an issue in a day, I now can take a step back and ask for God's help and say, I might screw this one up. You might want to give me some guidance here because I'm not sure what to do. But even more pivotal for me was seeing God's work in any given day and not trying to take credit for it, realizing that God was in it, you know, like something, even something small. Could be a kid's laughter, a baby laughter. We got grandkids here today. It
hmm
could be those types of things, and I have to recognize them. I have to recognize them for what they are because we spent so many years drinking that we overlooked or missed all those wonderful things that happen in life, the small things that God's involved in. And we just, once I started to recognize that, that life changed at that point.
Absolutely. Got to look out for all the miracles there
Yeah.
are in life. Is it finally strange feelings when you used to numb it with alcohol?
Yeah, I mean, the, it's a challenging question because when I first got sober, um, I mentioned kind of feeling like a doormat at the end of my sobriety. Like anger came back first, like
Mm,
anger about how people treated me while I was drinking. Now, I probably earned it. It's not like I didn't, but I started to stick up for myself again. That was the first one, and it frightened me a little bit because I was kind of pissed. I was mad, you know. But it was one that I was able to through some work with other alcoholics was able to get a hold of. But I've always been an emotional person. Like I know some people that when they drank it shut off sadness or grief or whatever. I was like, it was like to me, it was like building it bigger. You know what I mean? I just think by the end of my drinking, the emotions were so convoluted and jumbled, they didn't make any sense.
right.
So I had to get to a point in sobriety now where I realized what emotions were real, what fears weren't real fancied and something that I needed to deal with. Because I've always been wrapped up in fear. I may not act like it, but I am. And I think the fear one is me realizing it's okay. But what fear usually means is that I'm afraid of losing something or I'm afraid I'm not getting something I deserve. And the
Right.
fact is, if that is if I am wrapped in fear, that means I'm becoming too self-reliant and I have to put more faith in God in those moments. And that's kind of where the emotions aren't easy, but we certainly get much better at recognizing them and working through them than we ever did when we were drunk.
Right. Do you feel that there's a certain aspect of being sober that's hardest to do and one per se that's easiest about being sober?
As far as personally for me, as something being hard in recovery, I can say the hardest thing for me is watching those that don't make it and die because
Mm,
we had so many people that we lost during the pandemic and even prior to that that you could tell in their eyes they wanted to get sober. They just couldn't do it, and they couldn't find their way, or they weren't willing to connect to a higher power. Whatever the segment of recovery that would have worked for them, they weren't able to grasp it, and they're gone. You know, and I it's a weird emotion for me because I've gotten to the point where and I've told Cindy this that I go to these numerous funerals and I don't cry anymore. I'm kind of a crying type, you know. I'm
mm,
just numb to that. I don't want to be. It's just I've seen it so often that I think that's the hardest part. It usually hits me like 2 weeks down the road. You know, after the funeral, I'll lose it or something. But
right.
for me, it's the death and losing the ones that could have made it, and
For
for whatever
sure.
reason they're not here. And for me, the easiest, I don't know. I guess it's waking up in the morning. The humorous part is it's waking up in the morning and knowing where your car is, you know, but but I honestly I think the easiest part is my humor coming back.
Yeah.
When you walk into, you know, a group full of alcoholics or friends or whoever they are, like you're laughing genuinely now. It's the same laughter you had as a kid, and it's back and it's
It feels
real.
good.
Not that fake thing that you're putting on this face for everybody else. You're finally happy because I didn't get sober to be miserable, man. I just I'll tell you
Hmm.
right now, I got sober to be happy. And people say, you know, you may not be happy, things will get different. Well, how can they be happy compared to what we were living before, right?
Exactly.
And that's where I'm at. And I think I don't know if that's the answer to your question correctly. I don't know if it's the easiest, but I love that part of
No,
it.
I love that part of it too. And you actually keep us in stitches uh, some of the time on our meetings. So thank you
Yeah,
for that.
that's a cool group.
It is. It is. Now, service work is a huge part of the program, as you know. What are all the things that you enjoy doing to serve and give back?
Enjoy is a tough word to use because some of them are tough, but
That's true.
they're rewarding in multiple ways. But when I first got sober, I was very thankful that a lot of people who've been around a long time took me on what they call 12-step calls, where somebody was, you know, on their last legs and really suffering and needed to see another alcoholic to understand that there's some hope in it and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I love doing that. I don't do it as much anymore, but I still do tell my story, whether it's at a treatment center or anywhere that I'm asked to do so. I was taught to not say no to that, you know, if you can make it.
Hmm.
I tell my story and I have a lot over the years. I also have done a lot of work in the community or businesses that anybody that wants to talk to me about alcoholism in the workplace, I've had a lot of discussions about that. And one of the things I'm most proud of that we did years ago was that we started taking young kids who were getting sober in their teens or early 20s, and I was bringing them to high schools and junior highs to tell their story.
Wow.
And we didn't know the impact it was going to have. It had an enormous impact, where guidance counselors were emailing me after saying they had kids lining up at their office the next day to either talk to them because they had a problem, or to talk to them because their family member had a problem, right? So that was the most powerful one to me, because I did it in some selfish way to stay sober. It was part of my journey, but I didn't realize the impact it was going to have with students. And I picked that because at the time I still had a daughter that was in high school, and I thought no one, besides Mad or just say no, like in the 80s, like I thought something more impactful would be to see somebody almost your age who went through it, so that, hope that answers your question. But
That's
it's a lot of service work.
Wow. I'm blown away by that. I think that's such a great act of service for sure. Do you have a favorite resource that helped you in early recovery? Since you're an author now, maybe some books that you'd recommend to a newcomer?
I'm a self-help book junkie. There'd be too many to probably mention. I love Bob Goff. I don't know what it is about that guy. Do you know who that is?
I've heard of him, but I don't think
Yeah, he's got a book called Love Does. But there are a lot of books that are recovery related that I read. And it really is too many to get into, but I'm an avid reader. But my wife always makes fun of me because she occasionally wants to throw something in for fiction. She goes, "Can you read a story or something, please?" And I'm like, I don't want to. Like, I just constantly read things that, I don't know, maybe expand my mind a little bit. And the truth is, I probably only retain about 5% of what I read, but that 5% sometimes makes a difference. And there's a book that was written by an alcoholic that goes back a long ways. A guy named Wally wrote a book called Back to the Basics. If anybody ever looks at that, they should, because it kind of brings it back to when recovery and 12-step program started, and it kind of simplifies it. I don't know. It might be worth it to somebody to look into that. And there's also a book, not alcohol related, it's not recovery related, but it's called The Go-Giver.
Okay.
It's written by a guy named Bob Berg and John David Mann. They co-authored it. And the whole premise of this book, it's a fictitious story, but it brings back the principle of always bringing more value to the situation than what you're asking in return for it. In some ways, to always leave a place better than you found it. But it's all about bringing value to relationships in your business and all that kind of thing. And it has absolutely 100% changed my life, that book. And he's got a series of them, even about relationships, about other things. But that first book was called The Go-Giver.
The Go-Giver. I'll have to look at that one for sure.
Yeah, you should check it out.
Okay. Now there's a couple more questions, and they're generally for the newcomer. First one is, what advice would you give to prevent relapse?
I think you need to get in the middle of the herd. I think that is the most important thing you could possibly do, is get yourself surrounded by people that are like you. Because if you're always looking for the differences, you're gonna keep finding a reason to go back out and drink. I think that you need to get both feet into some sort of 12-step program or recovery program. I mean, there's a million probably ways to get sober, but you have to go into it full out. You can't half-ass it. You can't go in with one foot in, because that's what I did. And I relapsed for 3 years trying to do that. I think if you get in and you get in the middle of the herd and you surround yourself with sober people, you kind of have to do that and get away from the circles you were hanging out with. Because I tried to do both and hang out with my old friends while also getting sober, and it never worked. It always made me go back to the bottle. It wasn't their fault. They weren't even alcoholics, but I was. So for a long time, I had to surround myself with just people that were experiencing the same thing I did, and find a way, once you do get sober, to be able to give that away to other people, so that you always are reminded when you see somebody newly sober or at the end of their drinking in the worst of times, reminded that that was you not that long ago. So don't forget that.
That's right. Do you find being alcoholic an embarrassing label?
No, I don't now. I mean, I guess many of us are probably a little nervous to say it at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
but there's something cool about the world and how progressive and how a lot of changes are happening in this country, where I think alcoholics are looked at in recovery as a symbol of strength, because
Mm-hmm.
it touches families across the world. Even if you're not an alcoholic, you know one or you have one in your family. And if you are a model of how you got sober and you share that experience, strength, and hope with people, you're looked as a bit of a warrior, or at least a model of strength, where we used to be looked at like a person with a brown paper bag under a bridge.
Right.
I think that stigma's changed. I think that
It's
we're no
changing.
longer looked at like that for some reason. And I'm proud of that. I hate to say that I'm proud to be an alcoholic, but I am, because if I hadn't experienced that, I would never be where I am right now.
Exactly. I agree with you. And I think that recovering alcoholics should be the first in line to get jobs because I feel like we're the most honest, most, altruistic people and we
Sure,
want to help.
right.
So I
It's
just feel like
true,
we
and
give a
I
lot
think
of,
we're loyal to a
yes.
degree, because if someone gives us a shot, we don't forget that.
Yeah.
You know,
Thinking of giving yourself a shot, what would you tell the younger Dean after all that has happened now? What would you have told him if you were to turn back time?
wow. I guess I would have to phrase it in some way and say, if you what you're about to drink, if you know it'll take away your job, your home, and your family, are you still willing to do it? And the answer is, I probably still would have. As
Mm-hmm.
scary as it sounds. I'm a bit fortunate in the sense that I hate to say I had quite a few years of good drinking, but I had a good stretch of, let's say, drinking that was fun, or I didn't seem to have consequences.
Right.
But in my 30s, it really started to get bad. So I think I'd ask that person to consider otherwise. I just don't think I would have listened.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point indeed. Um, what what can you tell listeners that suspect somebody they know or love is using or drinking alcohol? How can they get help?
I think two things that I've at least witnessed that have worked. I can only speak on experience, but I think, as we mentioned, we always know an alcoholic somewhere, and hopefully that's in recovery. If you know someone in recovery, ask that person if they'll come talk to that individual, because they want to see somebody who relates to them, somebody who can see the same problem and know that they're of the same type, meaning once you take a drink, all bets are off. And I think if they can relate to that person, it gives them a shot to have some hope and some light at the end of the tunnel. But if it's real bad, I, I don't think treatment is what got me sober, but I do recommend it for people because you safely can detox. And secondly, just separating you from alcohol or drugs for 30 days or 28 days, whatever it is the foundation for a lot of people that never go back to drinking. I happen to have relapsed. I was the stubborn one who went back out, but I know a lot of people that went to treatment and never had a drink again.
So today, if you were to have just one drink, what would that do to you now?
All bets are off again. I heard an old timer say once, and it was one of the most impactful things anybody's ever said to me. He said, you couldn't take a baseball bat to my head to make me take that first drink. However,
Mm,
if I choose to take that first drink, I'll throw my family and everybody I love under that bus that's coming to get that second drink.
right, right.
And
Wow,
and
that's
that's the
impactful.
tragic way of looking at it. One drink for me is what sends me down a path where I become something I never wanted to be
Yeah,
ever again.
I completely agree with you in that respect. That's why I'm trying to go super hardcore this time around. Want to save my family, you know?
You're doing
Kind of,
good.
kind of love.
I'm glad I met you along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. And what would you consider your like best piece of advice or suggestion that you would give a newcomer today?
I may be getting repetitive, but I think that's the case. I think go find a circle of people that are, you're talking about recovery in general, right? I think
Yes.
if you want to get into recovery, you get around people who have got a lot of years of sobriety. Because the great thing about it is that, let's say 10 alcoholics and they've been sober 10 years. One of them out of that 10 is always going to experience something that you're going through, whether it be death or divorce or kids acting like, little devils, or, I don't know, there could be a million certain situations, your infidelity, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Somebody has gone through it. And if the guy over here hasn't been through it, the guy over here has been through it, and they'll put you in touch with each other, and you'll find ways to deal with problems in your life that it seems odd to you at first that you're taking advice from this old alcoholic guy, but or woman in your case. But for me, it saved my life because they are the ones who, when I didn't know how to make any decision in my first 90 days of being sober, they told me what I needed to do, down to something as simple as when to take a shower. I mean, like, I was out of my mind. And it took those guys loving me till I loved myself.
That's awesome. Is there anything that I have not covered that you'd like to cover before we get into where we can purchase your books, that is?
No, I think that's a great list of questions that some of them I didn't know were coming, and they just really are revealing, because if you almost made me cry in the middle of the interview, that's probably some good questions that made me think and come in with an open mind. So no, I don't think there's anything we didn't cover. Outside of the fact that I hope everybody who listens to this, maybe somebody gets something out of it. I hope somebody gets sober through what we're talking about.
That would be the best.
Yep.
Well, I'm so happy to have you come on today, and I want to let the viewers know exactly where they can find. Now, you've got one book already written, and it's already out on Amazon.
That's correct.
Okay, so they can find Was That a Red Flag on Amazon right now. And I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, you can put the link in it, or you can just literally go to Amazon and type in Was That a Red Flag with a question mark, and it'll bring you directly there. And you can get it in paperback or like a Kindle or e-format, whatever. So
fantastic.
And it's real short. It's an easy read. So if anybody, is struggling with a relationship or knows somebody that is, or they're trying to better the relationship they're already in, or if it just helps them start to love themselves or choose themselves over somebody else, I hope they read it. I hope they get something out of it.
Yes, absolutely. And Finding Myself Sober, when can we look for that?
Good question. I think it's in the editing stage right now, so I'm going to guess by summer. Let's say maybe July, if I'm being conservative. I think it'll probably be out by then. Sometimes it takes longer because you got to do cover design and all the crazy stuff you do.
Exactly.
Which is exciting, some of that stuff. But I'm hoping by July or August, and I will certainly let you know. I don't know how you get that out to your listeners.
Oh, yeah.
I'll let you know when it comes out.
I'd absolutely make an announcement on the show for sure. So by July 2022, we should be able to see Finding Myself Sober.
That is correct.
Everybody go out and get Was That a Red Flag? Because this guy is great. He's funny. He's so kind and true, genuine, like the real deal. And I think it'll show in your writing. I'm sure it will. So I just want to thank you again. Everybody, let's all give him a virtual round of applause. Thank you, Dean, so much for coming on the show. And I will see you at our meeting.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. It's such a cool topic to be able to do and send out in the world, and hopefully help somebody. So I appreciate what you do.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Well, anybody out there that's listening via podcast, please give us a 5-star review if you like what you heard. And if you're hearing us on YouTube, you can always hit the subscribe button or the share button right here. And I'll see you next time when the next episode drops. Thanks again, Dean. I'll see you later.
All right. Thank you.